Hello, and welcome to Brookline Booksmith's Author Event Series. My name is Alex Schaffner, and I am the events director here at the store. On behalf of all of us at Brookline Booksmith, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, whether in person or online, and for supporting an independent bookstore. We've been here since 1961, and that is thanks to readers like you. So thank you for being part of our community and for making tonight such a special occasion. And if you're just coming in and you don't know where to sit, there are seats in the very front. At the end of tonight's Q&A, you'll be able to get your books signed, and if you haven't picked up your pre-order yet or purchased anything, that will be right back at the counter. Please let us give you a post-it so that we can make the signing smooth and happy for everybody. Tonight, I'm very happy to welcome Jilly Gagnon back to the Booksmith. Last time Jilly was here, she came sporting a prom dress, and the room was faced in the other direction. Some things change. In fact, several things have changed since 2017, but some things don't. And we are thrilled to be back where we started to celebrate the launch of Jilly's new book. We're also joined today by Lucy Keating. Lucy is the author of Dreamology, Literally, and Ride With Me, which you can find back on the counter. Lucy has been an editor and story developer with Alloy Entertainment, as well as working in mobile entertainment. Lucy, thank you for being here. So like I said, last time Jilly was here with the book, it was 2017 for #famous, a YA rom-com about viral social media that completely necessitating the wearing of a prom dress in our used bookseller. She's since co-written 3 books in the Choose Your Own Misery series, The Office Adventure, The Holidays, and Dating. Today she's celebrating another turn, taking on mystery fiction with All Dressed Up. In All Dressed Up, Becca is trying hard to accept an apology from her screw-up husband, Blake. A murder mystery weekend at a hotel that used to be somebody's incredibly fancy summer home. But the Ritz and the gimmicks start to lose their shine a little bit when someone disappears for real. This is a slick, satisfying puzzle, a classic ensemble whodunit, and I cannot wait to hear all about it. So, please join me in welcoming Jilly Gagnon.
Thanks so much for being here. I think I'll probably start with a little reading. Should we do this? Okay. A little less awkward than just hang out like this the whole time. I'm going to do a little reading, and it is fairly early in the book, so all you really need to know at this point, Becca is our main character, her husband is Blake, and they have arrived at what she believes is a Gatsby-themed weekend at this beautiful manor hotel, right? So that's what she knows, and they've just met up with acquaintances, somewhere between acquaintance and friend, Phil and Heather. So that's where we're at. Oh, it looks like we're about to get started. Heather raised her thin eyebrows conspiratorially. Blake could read my confusion before I even opened my mouth. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. The weekend is limited to 8 guests. It must be the last couple. I glanced over. They were listening attentively to the butler's spiel at the bar. Do you think we should ask them to join us? If there's only 8, it might be nice to... I was cut off by a high-pitched, terrified shriek echoing down the hallway. For a moment, everyone sat frozen by the banshee cry. Then we burst into action all at once. What in the... I blinked at my hand, resting in a widening puddle of briny vodka. I righted the glass, shook my hand absently, and turned to Blake. He was already standing, holding his hand out to me. We should see what's going on. His nostrils flared, and he glanced over his shoulder. Wordless, I let him tug me up and after him, while Phil grumbled his way out of the deep club chair behind us. It occurred to me that this is what they always did in horror movies. They, being people who you scream at through the screen for basically choosing to die violently. The other couples moved aside as we joined them in the hallway, Phil and Heather just behind us. I could just hear Wynnum calling out over the sound of my thudding heart. Ladies, gentlemen, there's no need for you to put yourselves out. I'm sure some scullery maid was just scared by a spider. The next door over whipped open so hard the brass knob thudded into the wainscoting. Is that how you say wainscoting? I don't actually ever say that word out loud. The dark hallway seemed to leach the sound away like water on cracked earth. A young woman in the black dress and white apron of a housemaid stood in the door frame, blonde hair spilling wildly from beneath her starched white cap. Her eyes darted between us frantic, unseeing, throat working as if she might either scream or vomit at any moment. Please, I was just cleaning up and she... Her whole body started to tremble, and she took a stumbling step backward, knuckles going white where she gripped the door frame. "I think someone... Saints preserve me." And then she went boneless, thudding to the floor heavily in a dead faint. Instinctively, I rushed over to kneel beside her. I always had been a mother hen type. Blake used to make fun of me for it when we were met. The maid took shallow breaths, but breathing had to be good. I bent lower. "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" She lay there motionless, skin pale in the fading evening light that spilled in through the windows. I reached for her slim wrist, tried to find a pulse. It was steady, fast even. Could that mean something? I reached for my clutch to pull out my phone, vague memories of counting heartbeats and multiplying coming back to me from some elementary school gym class. When I remembered I didn't have my phone, I couldn't fit it. The martini had gone straight to my head. So I scrambled to my feet, stumbling as my heels stuck in the carpet. "Blake, I can't tell shit she's okay. Do you think you could..." Ah! I staggered back, my hip bumping into something. Then someone's arms were around my middle, making it impossible to breathe, to move, and the thud of something falling to the ground, and my feet were catching in the carpet. But what the fuck? There was a dead woman in the middle of the floor, and I needed to get away from the dead woman in the middle of the floor. At least, I assumed she was dead. She was lying on her stomach, blood oozing from her head onto the knotted wood floor in a sticky, viscous pool, clumping her short, straight hair into gruesome red-brown tentacles. Her skin had a gray, waxy look, and her flapper-style beaded dress was pulled up awkwardly around her knees, revealing a scrap of silky slip beneath. I swallowed convulsively, hand over my mouth, trying to move further away, but my feet wouldn't obey. Why wasn't anyone else moving? "Bex? Honey, are you okay?" Blake twisted me around, gripping onto my shoulders, staring into my eyes. "It's okay. Everything's fine. This isn't what you think." Behind me, Phil burst into a bellowing laugh. "We can all agree you pulled this one off, Blake." I blinked, confused. Below me, the maid groaned weakly. When I glanced down, her eyes were fluttering open. A pile of books had spilled across the floor from a side table I'd apparently upended. "Terry, what is the meaning of this?" The housekeeper, Miss Thrope, was pushing past the other couples into the room. She planted her hands on her hips, glared at the housemaid, struggling to her feet, then gasped. "Oh, dear Lord! Miss Caruner!" With a yelp, she hurried over to the dead woman, moaning loudly as she leaned over the body, shoulders shuddering. Wait a second. Why was she calling her Miss Caruner? Hadn't that been part of the theme weekend? The buzzy, skittery feeling of shock was dissipating, leaving only the buzzy martini feeling. If they were all still in character... Oh, dear Lord. I turned to Blake, eyes wide with the question that, judging from the casual way they were leaning against tables and bookshelves, had been answered for all the other guests well before they got here. He grimaced, mouthing, "Sorry," as the woman continued her hammy show of sorrow over the murder. My chest went tight as all the eyes in the room seemed to crawl over my skin. Wonderful. Just the way to kick things off by acting like a complete and utter idiot. And with just 8 guests, there was no way to avoid them. So, after this, they hand out books, they start the game, everybody has some fun, they're doing their murder mystery weekend. Becca is mortified and decides to lay into her husband later, and that is where I'm jumping to, and then we will talk about this. I didn't even wait for Blake to close the door before I rounded on him, waving the booklet in his face. "What the hell, Blake?" "Bex, I'm sorry, I should have told you." "You think?" I sniffed out a laugh. "You think maybe I might have liked to know that our theme weekend was a murder mystery game before I saw a dead woman on the floor?" Heather and Bill were there watching. Oh my God. Okay, in my defense, no, fuck your defense. There was so much pressure inside my skull, it felt like my eyes might splatter on him. Believe it or not, it's really scary to see a dead body. It's not something where you mentally take a step back and you're like, wow, that's unlikely. Probably the pool of blood is just corn syrup and food coloring. What a neat piece of interactive theater. And then you go back and enjoy a snifter of brandy. I mean, Jesus, Blake, what were you thinking? His body slumped and he shook his head. I wasn't thinking. I just know how much you like mysteries. You're always watching those British shows, and I didn't realize. He looked up at me, eyebrows tinted sorrowfully. Miserable, a perfect puppy dog. Damn it. Of course he had to go and do something sweet, like file the fact away that I love British mystery shows. I could feel my rage flickering, threatening to die. But no. So he managed to notice that I'd watched hundreds of hours of TV. Grief watched. He said it himself. He wasn't thinking, not when it counted, not about me, the real person he'd actually married. You're telling me it never occurred to you I might not love being made a fool of in front of a bunch of strangers and our only couple friends who have an actual adult life? I laughed sharply. It felt like the brittleness in my voice was spreading over my body like ice on water. encasing me in a hard, glittering shell. Or was that the point? Haven't gotten enough laughs at Becca's expense lately. Better find another way to make her feel like a complete idiot. Becca, of course I didn't want that. He reached for my hand, but I snatched it away. I could see the muscles in his throat working as he fought to keep calm. It was supposed to be a surprise, okay? Bill was doing it for Heather. You two were always talking about mysteries. It just sounded like something you'd enjoy. I thought you'd catch on sooner. Sorry, your wife's just too stupid to figure it out. My throat tightened, just like always, huh, Bex? It was getting harder to control my breathing. Blake raised a hand and looked up at me, his whole body tense, then leaned back on the bed, physically shying away from what we could both see coming. The backseat passenger we brought along to this stupid, ill-conceived surprise. My hands clenched around empty air, fingers so rigid they were starting to shake. I get that I should have told you before things started. I'm sorry, okay? I promise I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I just thought it might be more fun for you this way. I could feel it now, crawling up from the pit of my stomach where I tried to stuff it in a rickety little bamboo cage. Why did I think that would hold anything? Too late. Its claws were tearing through my middle, its mouth open in a snarling, slavering roar. Pretty sure I've had enough surprises from you to last a lifetime, Blake. The words tasted like venom, bitter and thick, coating my tongue. Maybe focus on not keeping things secret from me for once. The air seemed to suck out of the room all at once, leaving us suspended there, breathless. Two astronauts shot out into the vacuum of space. This has nothing to do with that, Becca. His voice was low and even, but I could see the muscles in his jaw contracting, his hands digging through the duvet. It has everything to do with it, I said, feeling more in control than I had in weeks, the surgeon drawing a scalpel through the patient, enjoying the wake of blood it left behind. We wouldn't be here otherwise, would we? Blake's shoulders hitched up around his ears. I'm just trying to figure out if you really believed that a weekend getaway would be enough to make me forget that you spent the last 6 months screwing your secretary. He looked carved from stone. She wasn't my secretary, he muttered. She was a colleague. Oh, God forbid I get her fucking title wrong. So that's where I'm gonna end.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I just finished this book about a week ago, and I loved it so much. It's the kind of book, and I'm sure you'll all understand what I mean when you say you just really don't want it to end, and you're sort of grateful for it because you get to read it every night. It's just sort of like sitting there waiting for you, and you did such an incredible job of creating this world that you just sort of like swan dive into. I particularly love like an estate, a mysterious estate somewhere, like put me there anytime, but then to layer in with that a disappearance and a murder and like a mystery weekend is like, it's just really wonderful. You created such authentic characters and your writing is so beautiful. This was my first time reading your work and I was just like totally so in love with it, and I will probably read it again. But so I have a series of questions I want to ask you. And so the first one is basically, you said in your acknowledgments that you started writing this during the pandemic mainly as a way to sort of escape your little your apartment. I don't know.
It was
and I really, that spoke to me because I know that for me, writing, it feels like this gift where a writer's brain is often a terrifying place, but also it can be a real luxury in that you know you can always go somewhere else, no matter sort of what's going on and what the future holds. And so I wanted to sort of ask what that process was like for you. What made you decide at this time, this was time to write a mystery? Had you always wanted to write one? How did the idea sort of spark for this?
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of mysteries. And I think one thing about this book that was particularly appealing to me, you didn't get a ton of it in that since I focused instead on husband cheating. A very lighthearted part of my book. But there's a mystery game and then inside it is another real mystery. So that was, I guess, like, people ask, like, where did the spark of the ideas come from? I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I wake up, I'm like, what if this? That might happen. So, like, the spark of the idea was, what if you were at a murder mystery weekend that you didn't know was a murder mystery weekend? How out of control would that have gotten? And my original plans for the book were somewhere else, but it kind of wound up here. So I think that in the pandemic, I wanted a game, I wanted something fun, I wanted to have a story that I could. I wasn't just living in a tiny apartment, it was in LA, so I also wanted to be in like autumn in New England because it was 100 degrees out and everything was on fire and you couldn't like leave the apartment because the air quality was so bad it would immediately be like worse than COVID. So that was fun. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna write myself into this other world. But perhaps the feeling a little trapped was coming into this character that's dealing with this marriage that she thinks she wants to preserve. She's trying to do that, but this was something that, for me, I haven't actually gone through something like this of being in a marriage and having somebody cheat on you, having to deal with that. But trying to imagine like what it would be like to go through that and like how difficult it would be and the headspace it would put you in was also a big part of like the germ of the story. I always would tell my friends early on that like this is actually a book about a marriage falling apart, but it's secretly like that's a secret. It's pretending to be a mystery. So yeah, I don't even know if I answered your
No, you did. You actually jumped to another question I have, and I'm debating if I want to go into that now. But I think we'll pop back to the infidelity in a little bit because I really want to dig a little bit more into what you just said. Another sort of basic I'm dying to know because I love mysteries. I love reading them. I love listening to them. I love watching them. And I've been trying to write one now for like 4 years. And it's like the longest I've ever taken writing anything. So I'm learning I'm not very good at it. And so I want to just ask like a very basic question of how you plotted it and if there were references that you really used. Did you read anything and be like, okay, here's how they did it? Is there any other part of that I want to ask you? No. I think, yeah, that's basically it. That's it.
Awesome. I mean, so probably my biggest reference for this was if you've seen the movie Clue. Like, I have been in love with that movie since I was a very young child. One of those movies that my mom thought was so funny that it made it past the filter of, like, this is not appropriate for you at a young age. I've probably seen it more than almost anything else. So I love, like, the sort of slapstick quality of that. That was definitely a strong influence. And then the murder mystery games themselves, which I've played several of in my time, and they're full of like bad puns and ridiculous, like over the top characters, and it's what makes them so fun. So those were like a big part of like the framework that I was taking from. As far as plotting a mystery, this was my first time plotting mystery, so I'm not sure that I did it so well either the first time. So I got people have editors. I think that there was the push and pull with me and my editor. Well, it was a push, and then I tried to achieve what she was telling me because she was correct. At first, my thought was, well, the problem is I don't know how to write a mystery, so I'm just going to hide everything. Everything's a secret.
Sure.
You'll never see a clue because you'll obviously know what it is because I don't know what I'm doing. So she's like, actually, no one will know what you're doing, and that's not necessarily what you would like to do.
Right.
So that was making it more of like a traditional mystery was a big part of the editing process for me. But as far as like going in, I definitely did know, you know, this is who I think did it.
Okay.
This is who I think did it in the game. I did actually write up a whole version of the game. Like it's not like
which you have quite a bit of in the book, and I was like amazed by that. There are all these instructions that the characters get when they're going away for the weekend, and I was like, where did you get? Like, I believe that you wrote them, but I was also like, wow, like I
straight plagiarism.
Yeah, you just
I did not plagiarism.
No, I was like, it's very, very clever. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean those parts are super fun to write because if you read the book, you'll see how corny and over the top they are, which makes them great for me as an author because I don't have to write well. In fact, you kind of have to write not so well. It's like perfect. This is a lot easier than trying to do a good job at my job. But yeah, the game part was like actually the easiest to write. Making sure that the mystery had enough like good red herrings and like that was a layering process for me for sure. Where it's like I knew where I was going, I knew who was going to be there along the way, and then figuring out how to put enough way stations that the reader wasn't going to be like minute one like obviously this, but also make sure that a reader of mysteries would not be like, okay, that's just out of nowhere. Right. That you did not set up for that at all. You're full of it.
I'm very familiar with that. I feel like I just set up like a million things as you were saying, and so everyone can go ooh, and then like the book ends and none of it has been addressed, which is what I'm really working on. At this moment, it's like, you know, it's like, well, this leads to this, and to this, and to this. That's what I'm trying to.
It worked for Lost.
Yeah.
For several seasons.
Right, it did work for Lost. And you just made me. Oh, you just said something else that I wanted to. Oh, I wondered if, in a way, like knowing that you have to return to the party and keep that moving. Provided some structure for you as you were writing of like, okay, I have this mystery in the real world that the main character is solving, but I know that I have to keep checking in actually on this other mystery and thread those together, and I don't know. I like structure. I feel like it makes me less anxious. Like,
Yeah,
so I
right?
know like what happens, and I just don't know. If
Yeah, I used to think that I was like a pantser, and I like writers are plotters or pantsers. Either you plot your books out and like take time doing outlines and things like that, or you go by the seat of your pants and you just make it up as you go along. And I like told myself, because I thought, I guess, that it was like more artsy or something, that I was a pantser, and it turns out that like I might be a pantser if I just want to write only bad books, but if I would like them to end up going somewhere, I need to plot them out. And it is really nice to have the game, and also the fact that the game takes place over a short span of time. Like, they're there for a weekend. So I have a timeline, and I have events that are going to keep happening, and everything else has to work around that, which it does make it a lot easier to figure out how to make a book.
Yeah, and puts a nice time limit for the reader to understand sort of what they're pushing towards, I think. I always like when people, I don't think I've done this, but whenever I'm watching a new season of something right now, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm starting to get a sense that this whole season is going to take place over the 3 days. Yeah. And I think that's really cool.
Well, it's a nice trick. I mean, from when you're writing mysteries and thrillers, I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, and having a built-in reason that it has to happen in one space over a short period of time is great, and having a built-in reason why the main character doubts themselves, which is often because I drink a lot, which is fine. Like, I enjoy a good, like, I was too drunk to remember, like, what's going to happen next. I read those compulsively. But having, for Becca, that was because I am losing my mind because of this infidelity, and I don't know if I can trust my own brain. Having those two things in place gives you all of this like structure that allows you to play with people and with your main character, because it's kind of like torturing the main character is the goal a little bit.
I it's funny, like I think, you know, there was a period of time where we just kept seeing so many shows that were sort of intoxicatingly interesting with the murder in a small town. It was just like, could we get a female detective who's like not an alcoholic and a drug addict and running from like the like death of her sister at a young age? Like, could we just get someone who's like maybe messed up in a different way, and then you?
What if it's the death of a boyfriend? Was that a good enough variety?
Yeah. So I think you did like that. That felt original to me, and I know that was something that you really wanted to actually bring to the genre, was because that was something that really stuck out. Is that Becca she's away for this weekend. She's pretty tightly wound, and you can tell that she's always been a little bit tightly wound, but that absolutely what's occurred in her relationship has really pushed her to this really fragile place, and she's now with a bunch of strangers, and then like everything is heightened, and people are disappearing, and there are fake murders, and like all this stuff is going on, and so like I thought that was cool that she's away with also her husband, who's like in many ways one person who she should really, really be able to rely on and trust, and she can't. And he's just another level of something that she has to doubt and be, confused about. And so I wondered, you sort of just touched on this, but if there's anything else you kind of want to talk about in terms of making that decision.
Yeah, like just to make her doubt herself that way. Yeah, I mean, I think I found it really interesting from a mystery standpoint, and then also from the standpoint of, like, I really like character when I write. It's the thing that I find the most interesting as a writer to look into. It's the thing that I think makes a book more interesting than, I mean, I like books with plot. I find the older I get, the less tolerance I have for books that are, like, actually intellectually challenging and perhaps light on plot. So I want all of that, but I think that what makes it more interesting and stand out is that you have characters that are memorable within those confines. And I wanted to find a way to have a person who is wanting to investigate this mystery and like has very like strong motivating factors that are personal for her and are not necessarily like because I was too foolish to remember or because I'm a detective and I do this all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I don't know what detectives do. I don't know how to write that book well, accurately. So,
and there's something fun about, because I think there's obviously such crossover in people who love mystery and listen to mystery or listen to true crime and having this desire to like solve it yourself. But I feel like I really realized that about myself when I think I'd left a job and I moved to a new city and I was like so invested in true crime at that time, and I was like, because I feel like I'm on it, like I'm on the case, like I'm gonna solve this right now.
I'm gonna do it.
And so having a character who is just as clueless about how to solve a mystery as any person would be, you get to live through, that makes sense. You get to live through her like finding a piece of evidence and being like, am I insane for taking this? Like what should I do with it? What does it mean? And that was fun to live through.
Yeah, I mean, I think Becca is very much in that way, kind of an every woman, every man type of character where it's like, you don't just magically understand how to do police work because you're set into a crime setting. Like, it's not like, oh, now I know what to look for because I've watched a lot of Luther. Like, that's not how it works. So she is exactly that person. She has watched a lot of things like Luther and Sherlock and all of the shows that I watch, even like the sort of silly ones that don't age that well, like Midsummer Murders. Like, the newer ones they're super fun. If you go back to the beginning, they're real weird. But like, you know, still fun in their way. Danny would probably not agree with that. But yeah, like if you put in the time just like trying to solve those things and then you're actually having to deal with real life, it's not so easy.
Are the Midsummer Murders where it's like a little town and then the countryside with like a priest and someone gets like knocked over the head?
I mean, there's always a priest, and and there's like this detective at the center of it who's got a very like essentialist relationship with his wife, where he's like, her cooking's terrible. And I don't know. There's some of them are more off the wall than others. That's definitely a show where very often the twist at the end, I'm like, well, how is anyone supposed to know that?
I feel like I did see one, I don't even know if it was Midsummer Murders, but where like the death relied on like someone being like atop the chapel and like dropping something that then like knocked into something else and like ricocheted and then killed someone, and you're like, what?
But like planned though.
Yeah.
They meant it. It was definitely, they set that up on purpose.
Okay, so also just, you mentioned that you love character and you love that work, and I something else I just wanted to say about this book was that like everyone felt very real and authentic, and even if they were sort of someone you might think is like a cookie cutter type, I was just so impressed with how I could really see them, and I really understood who they were. And so I wondered, like, when you plan character, like, is it just like coming right from your brain? Are you taking it from anywhere? Like, I also wondered how you
coming just right from my brain.
I also wondered like how you kept track of everyone, because you have everyone who's working at the murder mystery weekend, and you have everyone who's attending the murder mystery weekend, and
they both have double parts because like there's their
because
part
they're
in the
playing,
game.
which you did a great job. Like I was not confused. I understood who everyone's was playing, and when you sort of design them, were you like, I need them to serve this purpose. Like I'm gonna put this 8 people and here's how they're gonna serve my story. Like, did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean a little bit. So I think, well, when I start a new project, like one of the first things I do always is I have like this 11-page, like with nothing filled out. It's 11 pages, single-spaced in Word document that is like everything about a character. So it's, you know, like what's their name, what's their height, what's their eye color, what's their formative memory as a child that still lingers with them, what did their parents do to them that was the most like fucked with their head. Like it just goes on and on. What car do they drive? What car did they drive in high school? And you're like, okay.
That's great.
Yeah, and so like I'll fill one of those out for main characters, and it'll be like Becca had one, Blake had one, multiple other people who I'm not going to talk about like who got one in this book and who didn't because it's a mystery. But like multiple people in every book I write get these, and if they're more peripheral, I maybe quit about 3/4 of the way through. And I'm like, I actually don't need to know what model of car they drove in high school. It's not that important. They're not going to come with that. And then for some of the characters who are more side characters and who are playing a role, I'll sketch out major points of what I need to know about them and like what defines them as a person. So there are some characters in the book who, like, the role that they're playing within the murder mystery weekend is something, you know, like the butler. Like he's the quintessential butler, and I need to know, like, what are his tics? What does this guy in real life, like, do for his day job? Like, because he's a person who's working at a hotel in the Catskills. He's not like an actor. You know, what does he do for a day job? What does he look like generally? Things like that. They get like a much shorter version on like a doc that's like, okay, master list of everybody else. And then for the characters in the book, like, or sorry, in the within the book, those, as part of planning out the murder mystery game, I did give them the kinds of descriptions you get in murder mystery games, and so then it's easy for me to refer to those when I like want the characters to overact or do something like ridiculous in character for them. I can look at my list of, here's, you know, this is Miss Debutante, and this is what she, you know, her dad in Nebraska, like with the biggest fish in a small pond, like all of those things. Then I can take and give it to my characters in the book to play the part. I will say this was more complicated. Like, keeping this many characters in the air is more complicated than I've ever done before. So
it's very hard.
yeah, it's like the process was a little bit like build the railroad as you're going down it. It's like, oh, I don't know what that's about. I'm gonna have to stop here for a moment and back up and figure out who this person is, and then I can write them.
Sometimes I think doing that work too, I'm impatient as a writer, and so I like to, and I'm very plotty, and I like to just jump in. But then you do find that you don't know these characters well enough, and like absolutely the work suffers for it. And I have that like with a love interest right now that I really just didn't take the time to, and then you have to go back, and so you're essentially, it's hard for me to take the time to do all that prep work, but it absolutely serves, because then you just have to go back and then work on it and then go back and fix it like 50 times.
Yeah,
So
you either do it up front or you do it in edits. Like, you do it somewhere.
Yeah, you gotta do it somewhere, so you might as well start strong from the beginning. So I will keep that. I start those.
I'll send it to you, and then
Please
you can
do.
knock them out.
Do you have like, so it's questions?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
questions.
yeah, I
It's a
want that.
template that's like questions, and like, what is the answer to this?
Oh,
I don't
love
know.
that.
Like, which sign are they on the, you know, on the wheel of astrology? Like, oh, I don't know. I better figure it out.
I think that will, please send that to me as soon as possible.
Done and done.
So I'm sort of winding, you've covered so much of, we've sort of jumped around in a great way, and so I don't have much left. I did want to ask, and this one if you don't want to answer it, that's fine, but I was thinking about Becca and Blake's relationship, basically like the ending of this story. I won't give anything away, but to me, I think what's great is like you could imagine this ending, particularly for them, quite a few different ways.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you always kind of knew how you wanted things. What I didn't really say earlier is that Becca really, you show that this infidelity so well in that the way she oscillates, she rages, she backtracks, she really doubts herself. Ultimately, what I think is really cool is she starts to wonder, like, what do I even want out of this marriage? Instead of just being like, I have to fix it, I have to, you know, get the guy, I have to save. She's like, what about me? Like, what do I, and I think that's really wonderful, and I really loved that resolution, but I will not say where things do go from there between them, and I wondered if it changed at all, or if you...
Yeah, I mean, so I think that, like, this was one of those situations where I think that I was writing towards a specific idea of where they'd end the weekend, but where I think that they end as a couple may or may not match the idea of where they end the weekend. So,
Right.
without spoiling anything, like, part of Becca's whole journey on this is trying to figure herself out, figure out, like, what she wants, and why she was putting so much stock in, like, a picture-perfect version of a marriage as opposed to a marriage that's bringing them both actual happiness. So,
And how she might have lost her, in what ways did she lose herself along the way,
Yes.
which really, I thought that spoke to me a lot.
yeah, and like, you know, like the things that she's been doing because she thinks she ought to be doing them, not because she wants to be doing them, sort of like figuring out those questions. So, honestly, I want it to be unclear, and you can sort of decide where you think their marriage would
Okay,
go
cool.
based on what you bring into the story, because it's like, one of the things that that was interesting to me about Becca, like, she has a sister who's very black and white about infidelity, and like that's actually the character that like I'm probably the most like. Is like, okay, here's the hard line. If you've crossed it, great, now we know, now we're done. So like trying to figure out what it would be like to be a person who's trying to keep this marriage together was really interesting to me. But then like where does that lead you at the end? If you want to keep your marriage together, but you're realizing that maybe this marriage wasn't the thing that you thought it was and it shouldn't be, where will it take you next?
Yeah.
And so leaving it open-ended is, I think, A, because I could see her making a lot of different decisions at different points, and B, because I think that the nature of that kind of problem is that you don't really solve it.
No.
And I didn't really want a pat ending, like, and now everything's fine,
Yeah.
you know? Or,
Yeah.
and now
Or-
she's moved on and found a much better man, you
Yeah.
know, whatever the thing
She
is.
just drives off and leaves
Yeah,
him in
and
the
drives off into the sunset with one of the actors, and they're happily ensconced in this manner forever, which would be also great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd watch that movie.
I should say that when right before I read this book, I had like through a friend's work trip ended up on this old. One of my friends is like her boss is redoing a hotel that's like in the middle of nowhere, and I'd gone and been like, ooh, we need a murder mystery here,
Yeah.
and then I like picked up your book 2 days later, and I was like, thank God, but it's like even better because it's so layered and wonderful. So this is my last question. Is just because I loved this book so much. I want to know what is coming next for you and how soon I can get my hands on it.
Yeah, I do have another murder mystery in the works. It is a very different setup. It should be coming out about this time next year, and it is for sort of the elevator pitch is 4 friends from college. All went on a spring break. Their 5th friend at that point in time disappeared, and they never got any resolution on what happened to her. So 15 years later, they're trying to return to the scene and figure out what's going on, and of course all have lots of secrets that need to be uncovered.
Great.
It's tentatively called Scenes of the Crime, but if any of you have spent time in publishing, like, who knows if that's going to stick around? It might be called anything in 6 months, and that's okay. But yeah,
That's great.
It's partially told in screenplays and partially told in first-person narrative.
Love mixed media like that.
Yeah.
I think it also sounds highly optionable as this does. So
Fingers crossed, y'all.
there you go.
Option all my stuff. Thank you. The end.
Yeah, so I guess I don't even know where we are on time, but if
If
people
people
from-
have questions, please ask them. I would love to answer them. Yes.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Joshua Wasserman. Big fan.
Thanks.
I just am curious. This might sound like a stupid question, but why did you name the book All Dressed Up? Because like people could take that like oh, this is a romance novel or
Sure.
this is a romance comedy. Is it because like the book goes into layers of clothing?
Yeah, I mean, it's partially that. I don't think it's a stupid question at all,
Yeah.
because it does kind of read like a romance title. So the thing that kept going through my mind when you're stuck in a mansion in the woods was all dressed up, nowhere to go. And like they really literally have nowhere to go. The hotel is not just a beautiful manor that's been turned into a hotel. It is extremely remote. So you're stuck here. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it is that like both literally and figuratively in the book, people are playing a lot of different parts. So they're hiding behind disguises, and some of them are ones that they don't even know themselves that they're always wearing. But then obviously the game is like a very literal version. They're all playing these characters, and so if you don't know any of the people who are playing these characters, you don't know what's costume and what's real, which is part of what makes the very campy, hokey murder mystery game actually a little threatening to Becca at times.
Speaking of all those characters, I'm sure it's hard to pick a favorite, but were there any characters or personas that you were like most excited to sit down and write, or just had a lot of fun with?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, so there's a couple in the book. They're Drew and Gabby in real life, and in the book they're Bugsy Slugs, who is a mobster, I guess, and his best gal, Dolly Diamond. But the people playing these characters are like big Ren Fair fans and like avid like theater geeks, and so they're like extremely into the part. So it was always fun to write them because I think there's something both like charming and really like I have a very genuine, like not sarcastic, not anything, love for fandom and like people who are very, very invested in the things that they love. And they are so deeply invested in like playing these roles that that's really, really fun to put on the page.
And like just from reading it, like unabashedly themselves, like just so unafraid to just really own that, and I that's what I admired about them.
They're not there to like be cool.
No, and I thought that was
They are there to like win this game and have a good time, you know. So that was fun to write. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Do you ever write about characters that you really don't like?
Yeah, actually, I part of the reason I wound up in adult from YA is that I tend to write unlikable characters. I think because I find them fascinating. I think that for me, things that I don't necessarily identify with, but that I would watch the series on Netflix about, like, you know, somebody who's got no conscience, or somebody who's got, you know, I don't know, someone who would screw over their best friend as fast as they blink. I find that really fascinating, and then trying to figure out a way to make that real. So those people aren't just monsters, like villains who are there for the purpose of being villains. They are people who have a reason, you just might not agree with them. I would say this book, I think Becca is probably more easy to identify with than like a lot of my characters. I don't think she is tightly wound, but I don't think she's unlikable. No. But I do tend to write those characters. I don't want to spoiler my other books by telling you exactly the ways in which I write those characters, but yes is the answer.
It was a good point too that YA is really unforgiving about like one of the biggest criticisms of my most recent book is people are just like, I don't like her. And you're like, well, she's got an attitude because she's a teenage girl. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to write an inauthentic, but there's this idea in YA that to be flawed, if you are flawed, you have to have everyone in your family had to have died in a car crash, and then it's like you're struggling, and so I really love that you're saying like maybe I gotta shift my way into the adult space.
Yeah, I wrote so many YA books that did not sell that were like, oh, like this person is just really over the line and has no personal boundaries and will like hide in someone else's car so that she can figure things out about them. And we were like, that's really hard to identify with. I'm like, but isn't it funny? Sorry, maybe, I don't know. The book world will never know because the answer is like, but it's really hard to identify with. So yeah, like those are the characters I write over and over, and it makes it really fun because you always get to, you know, you get to read the weirdest biographies. You get to read, you know, I am deeply aware of like cult leaders for multiple books actually that I've worked on. Like what drives them. I could talk to you about it for a really long time. I won't right yet. Maybe later though if you want to ask.
I will, I'll ask.
Yes.
Yes, me again. I was just wondering out of curiosity, do you like writing in the genre of murder mystery, or like are you in future perspective, are you gonna write like different genre books or like stick with murder mystery?
So I do love writing murder mysteries and thrillers. I think that there's like an endless variety of ways that you can tell those kinds of stories and make them really satisfying. So I will hopefully, if everyone lets me, continue to write these for as long as people will read them. But I do actually, I've also started writing some rom-coms, and my day job, I work a lot in romance and rom-coms and things like that. So I am probably the person who will continually add random genres that I am working in just because it's interesting and you find ways into them that are fascinating and fun for you. Hopefully the world cares about those books enough that other people will see them. So.
And I think it's been nice recently. You're seeing more authors who are not as afraid to jump around a little bit. It used to be like, what's your brand? You have to stick to it. And I don't think we're seeing certainly a lot of YA that's moving into romance, and that's easier to sort of track. But I'm hopeful that just like a good book's a good book, and if you like someone's writing,
yeah,
you like their writing. And people have different perspectives on that. But I'm hoping there's more flexibility.
I think there is. I think there are a lot of people who are writing in lots of different genres, but who are stretching the boundaries of what genre writing can do, and like really effectively, and people love it, and so more people are willing to take those risks. Like a very obvious example that comes to mind is like an Emily Henry in romance. She's writing romance books that like half of them are tragedies, and there's a ton of depth, and yes, there's really great like sex scenes and like, a lot of steam, but she has these intensely layered characters. They're way longer than you expect from a romance, and everyone is there for them because they're awesome books. They're just really good books. And I think that a lot of genres getting to that point where instead of being like, oh, I'm embarrassed, I'm gonna hide in this genre closet, it's like, well, actually, no, I like this kind of book. It's really fun, and I want to see what I can do with it. So I think that writers in general are getting a lot more leeway to write stories that they want, and they don't have to fit in those boxes as much anymore.
Also, because audiences are getting smarter the more we consume, and so people expect to be surprised and they want to have genres mixed a little bit because they just sometimes you want something where you know everything's going to happen, and sometimes you don't want that. So
yeah, and sometimes you want to know like, okay, I know that at the end they'll get together, or I know that at the end like there will be a body on the floor, but let's get there in a way that we haven't seen before because why not? Does anybody else have questions? Okay, in that case, thank you so much for letting me talk about my book. It's been a pleasure to have you here.